What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about some settings that you actually have to change in Motorfest, and by have to I mean you should, right? You don't have to do anything. You can just play on default settings, but by changing these settings you're going to be unlocking your potential. Now if your skill level is not high enough to take advantage of that potential, then obviously this is useless. But if you think you have room to grow in this game, and I think everyone does, you definitely can take advantage of these settings and allow yourself to progress as a player. All right, let's get into it. Let's go. So the settings I'm going to be talking about today are in the control panel. So go to your options, then scroll down to controls, and we're going to be talking about a few different things. I want to start off with steering, because steering is something that directly affects and impacts your gameplay immediately. So there's a few things in here that most players probably don't really know a lot about. That's linearity, dead zone, and highest. I'm going to talk about those in just a moment, but let's start off with the steering sensitivity and the max lock. This is going to have the greatest effect on your gameplay immediately. Now I run a 90-90. That does not mean you need to run 90-90. Basically, the higher this number on sensitivity, the more sensitive your car is. So you'll notice when you press the steering on left or right, your car is going to be either turning really, really fast, or if you have it on a low setting, really, really low. Now the default, I believe, is 50. I strongly recommend going above 50. When you're just starting out, let's say you're a lower skill player, I would say start with 70 and 60 for your max lock. Let's explain a little bit about what max lock is. Dynamic max lock is the game's way of protecting you against yourself. So it doesn't allow you to turn the wheels at a full max lock when you're going fast. It reacts to your speed. If your car is traveling at a certain speed, the faster it goes, the tighter your steering wheels are going to be. So they won't allow your car to turn fully like this or like this. It'll turn slightly, and that's the maximum lock that you'll have when you're going fast. The higher this number, the less restrictive it is. The lower the number is, the more locked your wheels are going to be. So if you run a really, really low max lock, if you're going really, really fast, your wheels will not be able to turn very fast. And it's basically a fail-safe. It's supposed to protect you from overturning and locking up the front wheels, because if you have the ability to turn the wheels all the way to the left or to the right at high speed, the wheels will lock and your car will just go straight forward. So you don't want that. What I would suggest is running it slightly lower than your sensitivity at first, and as you get comfortable with this, you bump up your sensitivity to 80 and bump this up to 70. Just keep going 10 at a time until you finally get to 100 and 100. You basically want to be able to drive on 100 if you're not on direct mode. I personally am not even there yet. I'm running 90-90, which is not a huge difference from 100, but I'm just getting comfortable with it, and then I'm going to move it up again to unlock more potential. If you allow the car to do more things, it allows you to grow as a racer. So like I said, start off with 70 and 60, see how that works for you, then bump it up to 80-70. If that's feeling fine and you feel like you can control the car, go up to 90-80, and then again just start increasing your max lock to match, and then get to 100-100. Let's move on to the highest, the dead zone, and the linearity. So the first thing I want to talk about is linearity. All right, so starting with a default of 50 linearity. What it means is as you're moving your stick, you're seeing a direct relationship between how much you move your stick and how it impacts the car's behavior. Notice that as I get to just a little bit, it moves just a little bit. If I get to halfway, it's at halfway. Full lock, full lock. That's in a nutshell what the linearity is. But what you want to do is move your linearity to fit your driving style. Basically, the more you move this number up, the less it's going to move in the beginning of the curve, which gives you room for error. And then as you get closer to the edge of your the maximum movement of your joystick, it gets more aggressive, which makes sense because you don't want it to be super aggressive here in the beginning. You want to be able to make minor steering adjustments without the car going crazy and turning all the way. So this obviously works really well with a high sensitivity as well. The higher your sensitivity, the more you're going to need to adjust your linearity in order to match what you've got going on. Now, as far as the dead zone goes, this is important because if you have 0 dead zone, any movement, you'll see that any movement at all, even just a little bit, you can barely even see it. And it's starting to creep up on that impact curve. See how it just barely creeps up? And if I move, like, let's see if I can get it to stick, because I might have a little stick drift. See, I'm not even touching it, and it's already steering to the left because my stick has a tiny bit of stick drift on it, and it's not returned to center. So with the dead zone, you can actually move this over, and what that does is it gives you a little dead zone in the middle. So you can move it and nothing happens, right? Nothing happens, nothing happens, nothing happens. And then once it registers that after that 10%, then you've got your same steering curve. You want to put this where you feel comfortable. If you have a lot of stick drift, you can move your dead zone up and just to get rid of the stick drift. But to be honest with you, if you have stick drift, you should probably get a new controller. Anyways, that's basically dead zone. Let's get down to the highest. So highest is basically the limit. So do you want your steering to be full lock when your stick hits the side of the controller, or do you want it to be full lock when the stick is like, you know, 75 or 80% of the way, to where you still have room? If we move the highest down to, let's say, 50%, right? So it's basically you're going to be full steering lock at 50% of the joystick's movement right there. But notice I still have a lot more movement, and it's all the way full steering lock to the left. It's crazy, right? So you obviously don't want 50. I use highest on 100 because I have no problem with my joystick. It actually does go full lock one way or the other, and I like to know that when I hit that side, I know that that's the full lock. You could bump it down just a little, and that way you're at full lock a little bit sooner. But I run it on 100. All right, let's go into the throttle real quick, because this one is actually important as well. The throttle settings are basically the same thing, but with the throttle. So the linearity is going to be how direct is the relationship between the movement of your throttle and the actual movement curve that you see happening on screen. So as this thing fills up, that's going to be full throttle. This is half throttle. This is less than half throttle, barely any throttle. So linearity at 50 gives you a completely straight line, direct relationship between your throttle and what's happening in the game. If you drop it, it's going to be more aggressive at the front part of the throttle and then less aggressive towards the end. If you raise it up, see how the curve gets smaller towards the bottom? If you raise up the linearity, it's going to be less aggressive for longer. So you could do half throttle on your controller, and it's really only giving you, you know, let's say 20% of the throttle in game. But then as you start to pull, the very last part of the throttle is going to be full throttle. I run mine on 50. I like that direct relationship. As far as the dead zone goes, I run a 10, just because sometimes I rest my finger on the throttle, and during curves, it can affect the acceleration out because I'm already on the throttle and I don't need to be. So I run a dead zone of 10 just to protect myself a little bit. But you notice I can press the trigger and nothing happens. I'm not giving the car any gas until I press it enough to where it impacts that curve and it starts to give the car gas. So notice there's a little bit of give. The more you put on this, the more you can press the throttle without anything happening to the car. See how much I can press it? And then there it goes. So that's what you're looking at. I'm running a 10 on mine. Now the highest obviously is the same thing. It just limits the very, very top end. So I'm full throttle with pulling my trigger that much. Whoops, that much. Oh, it's hard to keep it there. But if I pull it more, it doesn't give me any more throttle. It's already at the top of the box. And then again, with braking, it's exactly the same thing, but with your brake, linearity, dead zone, and highest, it's just going to give you a more controlled feel. It also allows you to sort of tune out some of the defects in your controller. Maybe your controller is just not performing well and you need to make some adjustments. That's the best way to do it. Now, lastly, for the new settings in Season 6, we have the left stick dead zone and the right stick dead zone. These are the actual dead zones for the sticks. Down here in steering dead zone, this is actually just for the steering. So it's when do you want the steering to recognize that you're actually steering. I have that on 0. But if you go up here to left stick and right stick dead zone, this is a global dead zone on your stick for everything you do in the game. This automatically had like a 10 or 20% dead zone in the game, and it was because of the steering. It has always existed in the game, but finally they've given us the ability to get rid of that I strongly recommend getting rid of this unless you're on direct mode. Then you can actually, like, you know, go to 5 or 10 just to kind of make sure you're not like turning like crazy on straights on accident. So I strongly recommend you put these at 0. Left stick, right stick, put them at 0, start there, and then obviously adjust your settings from there. You want the stick to respond instantly to what you're doing. You don't want to have any dead zone if you can afford it. If your controller has a problem though, obviously you're going to tune that out with some dead zone. But I would say for the most part, you want to run a 0 dead zone. So let me give you all of my settings. That way you can see exactly what I'm doing. I've got a sequential gearbox, 0 on left stick and right stick. If we go down to the steering, I've got it at 75 for linearity, 0 dead zone, and 100 on the highest. I'm not using direct mode yet. I'm at 90 sensitivity and 90 dynamic max lock. For the throttle, I'm looking at 50% linearity, 10% on the dead zone, 80% on the highest. And for the brake, I'm on 55 and 100. So there you go. That's my settings. I really hope this helps. If you have any questions about this, I know it's not the most easy thing to grasp, but if you have any questions, send me a DM on Instagram or Discord, and I will gladly answer your questions. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. We'll catch you on the next one. Trigger out.